Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today I want to talk about John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. In case you didn't know, Books for MKs is a charity that donates books to missionary kids. If you want to donate to the kids, you can do so at GoFundMe.com. There's a link down in the description, there's a button at the end of this video, and there's a link right up here where you can donate to the kids. And don't forget to click on that subscribe button and on the little bell so you can be notified every time that I post a new video. I am a huge, massive fan of J.R.R. Tolkien. I first read The Hobbit when I was in college and then immediately picked up Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion and just started grabbing everything that I could about Middle-earth. So today I want to try to briefly tell you a little bit about his life and then tell you about some of the books that I've read, books that I still need to read, books that I have on a wish list. So let's jump right in. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born in South Africa in 1892. His father was a bank manager, but when he was 3, his father died of rheumatic fever, and young Tolkien returned to England with his mother, Mabel Tolkien, and his younger brother, Hilary. They initially lived with his grandparents or with his aunt on her farm called Bag End. Hint, hint. That's from Lord of the Rings. But when Mabel Tolkien joined the Roman Catholic Church, her Protestant Baptist family withdrew all financial support of her and her sons. Tolkien was homeschooled by his mother, and I find that really fun because I was homeschooled. He could read by the age of 4, and his mother was teaching him a lot of extras like botany and Latin. When Tolkien was 12, his mother died of acute diabetes, leaving the sons in the custody of a guardian, Father Francis Morgan, because she wanted them to be brought up as Catholics. Tolkien attended King Edward's School, and he won a foundation scholarship and formed a secret society with his school friends called the Tea Club and Barovian Society. During his teen years, as he studied both Latin and Anglo-Saxon, Tolkien discovered a love for creating languages. He loved to make up words and alphabets and entire languages along with his cousins. And this, of course, was the precursor for his construction of Elvish and Dwarvish languages in Middle-earth. In 1911, Tolkien began studying at Exeter College in Oxford, studying English language and literature, and he graduated with first-class honors. At the age of 16, Tolkien met Edith Mary Bratt and fell in love. But his guardian, Father Francis, did not approve of the relationship because Edith was Protestant, and he forbade them from having any contact until Tolkien was 21. So for almost 3 years, they had no contact, not even letters. But on Tolkien's 21st birthday, he wrote to Edith, said that he still loved her, and proposed. She was actually engaged to another man, but she broke off that engagement and accepted Tolkien's proposal, even agreeing to convert to Catholicism. This dramatic romance of theirs was the basis for Tolkien's story of Beren and Luthien. Luthien is a beautiful goddess of Middle-earth, and she falls in love with a human man, Beren. Edith and Tolkien were married in 1916, right in the middle of World War I, and just a few months after Tolkien had completed his training as second lieutenant in the Lancashire Fusiliers. He was sent to France soon after as a signals officer, and he would put little dotted codes in his letters back to his wife so that it could get past the military censors and he could let her know where he was. After a few months of terrible conditions, Tolkien got trench fever and was sent home. Most of his school friends from the Tea Club and Barovian Society were killed in the war, along with almost his entire battalion. It was at this time that Tolkien began to write The Fall of Gondolin and the mythology that would eventually become the Middle-earth Lord of the Rings stories that we know. Although people have tried to establish allegorical connections with Tolkien's war experiences and the War of the Rings books, Tolkien always denied that there was any allegory attached to Lord of the Rings. In fact, he really hated allegory and was always criticizing C.S. Lewis because of that. Edith and Tolkien had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. to whom Tolkien was very devoted, playing with them, telling them stories, writing them letters from Father Christmas. And Edith and Tolkien had an extremely happy and devoted, loving marriage. In 1920, he worked for a while with the Oxford English Dictionary, where he worked at the etymology and history of words of Germanic origin. Then he became a professor at the University of Leeds, and in 1925 he got a fellowship at Pembroke College as a professor of Anglo-Saxon. It was during this time that he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, as well as many academic works such as his translations of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Beowulf. Tolkien joined a literary group called the Inklings, a very famous group which included C.S. Lewis, another of my favorite authors. And those two would read aloud to each other their stories and writings before publication and comment and criticize each other's writing quite fiercely. They would take long walks and talk about philosophy and history and mythology. And Tolkien was very instrumental in Lewis's conversion to Christianity. I could do a whole separate video just about the friendship of Tolkien and Lewis, but I'm trying to keep it brief here, so that'll just have to be for another video. In 1945, Tolkien moved to Merton College, Oxford, where he was a professor of English language and literature, and where he stayed until his retirement in 1959. Tolkien's wife Edith died in 1971, and Tolkien followed her just 2 years later at the age of 81. They were buried together in the same grave, and their tombstone is marked with the names Beren and Luthien. I could spend way more time talking about Tolkien's life. He had a very full, dramatic life, you know. There are lots of little funny anecdotes about his writing and his students and his funny little quirks and stuff, but that would make for a very long video. So now I want to talk about some of my very favorite books of his, my least favorite books of his, and some books that I still need to read. So I'm going to start with my favorites. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is right at the top of that list. I actually have two different copies of Lord of the Rings. I have my paperback copy. Let me put this down. That was very heavy. Okay, I have my paperback copy, which unfortunately is like a movie tie-in copy. But I don't mind so much because it's not like a character's face on the front or something. It's just a Nazgul, so I'm good with it. But it does have some characters on the back. But this is my actually opening it up and reading it and eating chips and, you know, whatever. I don't care if this copy gets messed up or if the spine cracks or whatever. This is my actually sitting down, throw it in my purse, take it with me, reading it copy, you know. Then I have my beautiful, pretty, never touch it, my beautiful hardcover copies. This is sort of movie tie-in as well because it has pictures of the Elvish army, but I mean, it's not really movie tie-in because, like I said again, there's no characters on the front or anything. And each of the covers have just kind of scenery. Well, I guess that one is Saruman, but whatever. And then the Rohirrim for the last one. One of the best things about these hardcover ones is in the back, there is a massive map that folds out. It's humongous. And it's all in red and black, and it has the journey. Oh, now I can't fold it back. Hang on. It has the journey of the Fellowship. So it's really, it's a huge map. It's interesting to be able to fold that baby out when you're following whatever's going on in the story. I did actually sit down and read from these editions one time, if I can get them back in here. Hang on. But only one time. One time I actually sat down and read from these, not from my paperback one. But I usually don't read from this one. Whenever I'm rereading Lord of the Rings, which is like every other year, I don't read these are the pretty ones. And of course my next favorite is The Hobbit. And again, I have my pretty copy and my beat up paperback copy that I actually read from, and this one I've only read from once and then it never gets touched. I really love this one because this mimics the original cover of The Hobbit when it was first published, and the artwork is from Tolkien himself. Tolkien drew this artwork himself. And the end papers are the map to Erebor. So, and tucked inside the pages, I have my movie stub from the first time I went to see The Hobbit, but it's all faded and stuff now and you can't hardly read it. Another favorite are some of Tolkien's short stories and poetry. I love Farmer Giles of Ham. It is just the best. And I love Smith of Wootton Major, so I have both of these in here. And the other one I love is The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is included in the Tolkien Reader. Let's see, the Tolkien Reader has Tree and Leaf, Farmer Giles of Ham, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, Tolkien's Magic Ring, and The Homecoming of Bjorfnoth and Borthelm's Son. Yes, you can tell I know how to read Old English. Sure I do. So, some of my favorite short stories by Tolkien. Love these. You cannot really call yourself a true Tolkien fanatic unless you've read The Silmarillion and probably own 2 copies of that as well. So, the one that I usually read is this one. It's the paperback, and then the hardback is quite old. It's from the 70s, you know. I'm not sure why, but it has an old Aeromexico ticket in it. Weird. First American edition published in 1977. Yeah. So it's quite beat up, but it still has the dust jacket. Wow. It's hard to find used books that sold the dust jacket. So this is the one I don't read. This is the one I actually sit down and read. I've only read The Silmarillion twice, and I did not enjoy it the first time. I was expecting it to be more like Lord of the Rings, and it wasn't. It's just very different from Lord of the Rings. It's much more heavy drama and everything. So I was kind of disappointed that first time. But then when I read it the second time, I really enjoyed it. And I think it's just because my expectations were different. And so then I sat down and enjoyed it. So, yeah. And that takes care of my favorites. And those are, you know, Tolkien's main works, basically. Some other ones that I enjoy are The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. I'm not sure how to say that, but that's a good one. I also enjoy Children of Hurin, which is actually just kind of part of the Silmarillion. I mean, this story is included in here, and then they just sort of redid it as its own thing. It's very sad and heartbreaking, but really good writing. Another one that I enjoyed was The Story of Kullervo. It's very epic mythology, and it's quite sad and dramatic, but again, the writing, it just draws you in. It's just so good. And now we come to my least favorite of Tolkien's works. And there is a definite theme and a mood here about why these are my least favorites, because my least favorites are Roverandom, Mr. Bliss, and The Father Christmas Letters. I don't like these stories, and I don't like the little illustrations that come with them, which Tolkien did himself. I can't really even tell you why. I know that they're supposed to be charming and sweet, and oh, he wrote them for his children, you know, and I read them, and I just, doesn't do it for me. Don't like them, sorry. Out of the History of Middle-earth books, I have read, let's see, just a few of these. I read the Book of Lost Tales, volumes 1 and 2. I've read Lays of Beleriand, and I've read The Lost Road. There are a ton of other books in that series, and it's all just basically notes of Tolkien's, and then Christopher Tolkien, his son, talking about how he edited things in the Silmarillion, and, you know, saying, oh, here's where, you know, Tolkien was writing this, and then he changed it to this, or he changed this character's name for such and such a reason. So it's not really stories, it's more about how the stories were written. So it's just a lot of notes and editing and stuff like that. You really get into the minutia. I've read a lot of Tolkien Middle-earth companion books and nonfiction and biographies and letters and all kind of great stuff. So now I'm going to show you those. I read the complete Middle-earth A to Z, which is basically an encyclopedia, like, you know, just dictionary entries of Middle-earth names and places and stuff. And I actually sat down and I read through the whole thing. I read through a Middle-earth dictionary because, you know, that's how crazy I am. And then this one is another Tolkien dictionary by David Day, and he also wrote a Tolkien atlas with really gorgeous maps and everything in there. I've also read the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I really need to reread this one soon because it's absolutely wonderful. Letters to his children, letters to his friends, to his family, and you really get a sense of just who he was, you know, and how he lived his day-to-day life. Last year I read A Hobbit, a Wardrobe, and the Great War, which is about how the Great War, World War I, affected both Lewis and Tolkien and how it affected their lives and their writings afterwards. I've also read, years ago, I read Humphrey Carter's J.R.R. Tolkien biography, and I really enjoyed it, but I don't know, I felt like Humphrey Carter kind of maybe put his own spin on things or dramatized things a little. And so I always kind of take it with a little grain of salt, maybe. Like, I'm not sure that, are you sure that's right? You know? Another book by Humphrey Carter is The Inklings, which, you know, goes through the friendship between all these amazing literary figures in The Inklings. A really cool book that I read and enjoyed by Ruth S. Nowell is The Languages of Middle-earth. So it talks about how the languages were developed and just, you know, all of these incredibly beautiful facts about just the beauty of the words and how they affected the mythology that Tolkien had set up in this, you know, beautiful world that he created. One of my very favorite books about Tolkien is Tolkien's Ordinary Virtues by Mark Eddy Smith. This takes a lot of these essential lessons for living that are inspired by Lord of the Rings and the characters in Lord of the Rings and situations and things. And we see characters responding with courage and with self-sacrifice, you know. And so I just love it. And it's so full of really good biblical images and spiritual lessons. So this is one of my favorites. So now on to my TBR, because there's a lot of Tolkien still that I need to read. First of all, I need to finish the History of Middle-earth series. There are, I think, 5 or 6 more books in this series that I haven't read. I need to read Master of Middle-earth by Paul Kocher? I don't know. But it's just about the fiction of J.R.R. Tolkien and how his life, you know, really influenced his writing and how his beliefs and how all of his education and everything kind of came together to create this incredible mythology. I also need to read A Look Behind the Lord of the Rings by Lynn Carter. I really hate this cover because it looks scary. But this is just more of an in-depth exploration of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I still need to read Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. So these are books that were never finished and edited, stories of Middle-earth that were never finished. I think a lot of this is in the Silmarillion already, and it's more of just sort of notes about, you know, genealogies and how things were created and how things were edited and stuff. And it has little notes saying, you know, oh, well, Tolkien never finished this, but this is what we think he was going to write, and lovely stuff like that. On my wish list, I have The Fall of Arthur by J.R.R. Tolkien. I think that was just published last year or something, and I haven't grabbed it yet, but I really want to. And I want to read J.R.R. Tolkien, A Life Inspired. This is by Wyatt North, and I have that one on my wish list as well. I do own 2 pieces of Lord of the Rings jewelry. I have a leaf brooch from Lorien, and I have a necklace of the key of Thorin's Key. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what is your favorite book by Tolkien, other than like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I guess, because that's everybody's favorite. Or leave me a comment and tell me who is your favorite Lord of the Rings character. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.